Everyone, staff, and residents, thank you very much for coming out to be with us here this evening. As you can tell, we'd anticipated a bit of a bigger crowd tonight, but I'm sure that Mother Nature has had something to do with that. But we look forward to a very busy meeting tonight. So I'm going to start by saying it's Pink Shirt Day today. I didn't have a pink shirt, I had a pink jacket, so it's a support of anti-bullying. And speaking of bullying, I think Mother Nature's been a bit of a bully the last few days, so I also wanted to acknowledge our wonderful first responders who have been out there and our roads crew keeping the roads clear for us during these storms. And a special thank you to our community partner, Gateway Casinos, for being there on Monday and allowing the people that were stranded on the 400 highway to get into a nice warm place with a coffee and a hot chocolate. It was just shows the strength of our community. So I'll start by saying that we are now open. This is our 5th meeting of this new council, so we've been very, very busy so far. If you do have a cell phone, I'd appreciate it if you would please set it to silent so it doesn't disrupt our meetings. Public comments made during this meeting are audio and video recorded and shall form part of the record, which will be retained according to the town's retention bylaw. And for more information about that bylaw, our lovely folks here in the clerk's office would be happy to tell you more about it. I would anticipate that there's probably a lot of people online tonight due to the weather and due to the fact that we have some very hot topic issues tonight. So welcome all of you who are on the cameras. So we'll start with our open forum, and our open forum is to speak to items on the agenda. I did have one person signed up for open forum, and that was John Kunze, but I'm going to ask John if you wouldn't mind waiting until we get to the drainage portion of the meeting, and then we'll...
That's where I intended to be, so if I put my name on the wrong sheet.
Not a problem, that's fine. So we had no other items on open forum tonight, so we'll move forward with an approval of our agenda. The recommendation is on the screens in front of you. There has been some agenda repair required for tonight's meeting, and we will is this the right agenda? Okay. So the recommendation is that the contents of the agenda for February the 27th be approved with the following changes. And I'm going to ask the deputy clerk. The item about Matthew's house was withdrawn because of inclement weather. And the staff report that's placed on the agenda tonight we will deal with when we get to the Drainage Act issue. So I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder. That would be moved by the Deputy Mayor Davidson and seconded by Councillor Ices. All those in favor? And that's carried. So I'd now ask if there's any members of council with a pecuniary interest that they'd like to declare. And I'm seeing no indications, but if one becomes apparent to you during the meeting, please just let the clerk's office know and we'll take care of it at that time. So our first delegation for this evening would be Mr. Jeff Dixon from Burnside Engineers, and it's regarding the final engineer's report for the South Innisfil Creek drain. And while we're getting ready, I would ask that anybody who is here for the drain, there are copies of the staff report that all of council have, and that staff report is also on our website and has been there for a week. So if you're online and you'd like to look at it, you can. But if you're here regarding the drain, please pick up a copy, or we could have someone from staff pass you a copy of the staff report, because it is really helpful to follow along. It helps talk about how we got to where we are, the chronology of the drain, and so on. So please take advantage of that. And whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn Dolan. Council and staff, it's appreciated to be able to have an opportunity to present our final engineer's report for the South Innisfil Creek 2019 improvement. Going to quickly introduce the members of the team that are present this evening. We have Don McNulty, PEng, who is the team leader, Natalie Connell, who is an engineering assistant and helped co-author the report, and myself. Ladies and gentlemen, the presentation, this PowerPoint presentation, will be prepared and uploaded to the town's website. There's a lot of information we're going to try to cover in the next few minutes, so if you want to see a copy of it later, you can make yourself available to that website and you can take a look for it. With that in mind, we're going to proceed to some details of the project, and I'm going to turn this part of the program over to Natalie, who's going to go through some of that stuff first before we get into some of the costs and the assessments. Natalie?
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Your Worship. So this final report has been building on a report that was submitted last August, our draft report. And it essentially, it builds on what we said before. So the same objectives, that hasn't changed. The general design and proposals have not changed either. Basically, we have a set of 9 objectives and 10 recommendations for the South Innisfil Creek Drain project. And those are all detailed right in the report. And the estimated project costs came in at $5,265,000. The report itself is quite large. Part of that was due to the fact that we wanted to include the many reports and submissions and documentations that supported the decisions that were made in the final municipal drain report. And those are all provided in the appendices of both the digital file and the full copy of the report. So the drain itself is quite large. The main drain is almost 10 kilometers long, and there are about 5 kilometers in branch drains. The watershed area, which is outlined in orange on the photo there, is approximately 8,000 hectares, so around 20,000 acres. About 260 of that is in the town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury, and the rest is in the town of Innisfil. In total, we have 862 parcels of land on the drain, so quite a few landowners involved in the project. Again, this is all going to be on the website, and it's detailed much more thoroughly in the report. But what we wanted to touch on with the history is the fact that this is a very old drain. So it was created in 1903. And then the report that governs the current municipal drain was written in 1954, and some of the branch drains in 1956. So since then, there have been some minor improvements, some maintenance, and a clean out in the 1970s. But apart from that, the drain itself is based on that 1950s report, and there haven't been any major improvements to the drain since 1970. So as a result of that and some flooding in the early 2000s, council at the time had appointed Dillon Consulting to prepare a final report for the improvements to the drain. Dillon Consulting filed this final report in August of 2013. Council, however, did not accept the report, and as a result, Burnside was engaged to do a peer review of the project. And upon Burnside's recommendations, Dillon declined to continue the work, at which point Burnside was appointed to prepare another final report for the same project, which we filed 2 weeks ago. So these photos were also in the August presentation that we gave, but they do add a lot of context to the purpose of the project and why we are addressing the issues. So in the photos here, you can see there are a lot of deadfalls in the drain. There's some serious erosion in quite a few locations. And through the market garden, the drain banks are exposed. There's been a lot of sedimentation and, again, a lot more erosion. And all of this sort of lowers the capacity of the drain. And we found that the existing drain does not have the capacity to convey storms that are up to today's standards for municipal drains. And so that results in a lot of extensive flooding, especially in the market garden area. So these photos were taken almost exactly a year ago during the flooding, and you can see just like the one photo is taken from Second Line on the right, so it shows just how far and widespread this flooding goes during storm events. Another major component to the project and for reducing the flooding were the culverts under Highway 400 and Reeve Boulevard. The culverts have always been perched above the drain invert, so they need to be lowered. They aren't performing to their standards, and any improvements that are made to the drain outside of replacing these culverts are more or less for naught, because the culverts are still too high and will still cause flooding almost all the way up to Third Line. So we along with the town, have put a lot of time and effort into meeting with the MTO and modeling and proposing a solution for both the MTO and Highway 400 and for the town for the Reef Boulevard crossings. And in November of last year, the MTO agreed to adopt our proposed solution, and they've undertaken the process to get those culverts replaced with the interim solution and moving towards the ultimate solution. And the town has also agreed to adopt one of our solutions so that when construction happens on the drain, it's not obstructed by these culverts. So another major part of the project that from the outset was very important to the town was stakeholder involvement and sort of establishing accountability and transparency as we went through the project. So right away, Burnside took several steps to make sure that we were doing this throughout the project, and this included doing things like setting up and meeting with the Public Liaison Committee, having the Public Information Center last February, having several meetings with landowners on the drain who are involved and have been involved for the last decade. We've also had meetings with all of the different environmental agencies, multiple meetings and phone calls in some cases, and then just being available by email and by phone to discuss landowner questions and concerns. All of these discussions are also ongoing. We're not stopping right now. We're continuing to have discussions with landowners and especially with the agencies. And now, Jeff.
Thank you, Natalie. I was asked to provide a little bit of information or a little bit of history on myself as an engineer and a practitioner. There's about 88,000 engineers in the province of Ontario, and there's less than 50 who actively engage in writing reports on the Drainage Act. I did grow up on a family farm north end of Huron County. I've been involved in projects under the Drainage Act since '82, been certified as a drainage superintendent since '86, and an active member of the Blue Water chapter of the Drainage Superintendents Association of Ontario. And although I participated, I did not author a report on my own until about '95 after receiving my degree. I've made presentations at various conferences, the Drainage Engineers course in front of the Drainage Superintendents Association conference. I actually made a presentation one time to the OMAFRA Appeals Tribunal on assessment logic used by drainage engineers in the province, and to the Ontario Crop and Soil Improvement Association. I've been a guest lecturer for 11 years at the annual Drainage Superintendents course that's offered by OMAFRA and now by the Business Development Centre at the University of Guelph. And I'm the current chair of the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers Land Drainage Committee, serving in my 12th year. Some of the design criteria and considerations, these were detailed in section 8 of our report. There were two major components that we allocated to that design consideration and the design criteria. The major components were water quantity and water quality. Put a few bullets there, and again, I apologize if we go through these quickly, but this will be available on the website. Some of the aspects of the design and the criteria, the considerations were contained in the hydrology and hydraulics reports, which is also an appendix of the Drainage Engineers report. And that some specific reference was made to a new publication, 852, which is entitled A Guide for Engineers Working Under the Drainage Act in Ontario, which was recently published and released near the end of 2018. As far as proposed work, all of this information is contained in section 9 of the report. The main drain was designed and detailed in accordance with the hydrology and hydraulics reports, so there wasn't a lot of information reiterated in the report itself. So consult those appendices or that appendix for the design considerations and the details of that design. The proposal for the actual work itself, in accordance with respect to the main drain, and with respect to the branches, is to work only on one side to minimize the disturbance, and it is expected that a long stick excavator will be required to do that because of the width of the drain. The sides of the working space, or where we have allocated the work to be done, are detailed in Appendix F, station by station, property by property. So if a landowner is concerned which side of the drain they're going to be conducting the work, or we're proposing to conduct the work from, they can refer to that Appendix F. And I've included there at the bottom a typical cross-section which shows what it is we are proposing to do in an area for the widening in the major part of the watershed at just upstream of Highway 400. And if you proceed upstream, that will designate the side that we are working on, so left or right. We didn't put in directions because the drain does change directions and angles fairly regularly. Continuing with some proposed work in regard to some crossings. We are proposing to actually remove and replace 2 crossings as part of the drain work. The main drain crossing on the 4th line, the existing 2 culverts will be replaced with a 6 meter by 2.5 meter precast concrete box culvert. And the 10 side road branch drain crossing of the 3rd line will be replaced as well. We have made mention of 2 other crossings, the Highway number 400 crossing and the Reeve Boulevard crossing. Both of those will be attended to by the respective road authority. Environmental concerns. This information was contained in our presentation, in our August presentation and our draft report. I won't spend a lot of time on it except to note that there are some significant environmental concerns in regards to Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority in regard to fisheries, fish habitat, the Endangered Species Act, and species at risk, etc. Some of them are listed in the one bullet under MNRF. We are awaiting authorization from DFO, but are confident that it's forthcoming. We've received agreement in principle from Nottawasaga Valley, but we will obtain a permit prior to construction. And we are in discussions with Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry in regard to species at risk. Probably most of the attendees and council too would be most interested in the estimated costs. We've contained or presented in a summary of some of our information from the report. And what we tried to do so that you can get it in context is we've included a listing of the numbers that were contained in the draft report and the numbers that are now in the final report to give a comparison and a snapshot. All of this information, the details of this information are described in section 11 of the report and are contained in appendices A, B, and D. All stakeholders and council are reminded that all costs contained in the report are estimated, and the final cost will be based on the actual incurred costs under each respective heading. This is a bit of a snapshot of the costs, and the more detailed information is alluded to in the information or in the sections of the report I just described. Quickly, construction is for simply that, the construction of the proposed works is detailed in the report, on the drawings and in the specifications. The allowances will be expanded upon on another slide. Engineering, again, is self-explanatory. Administration includes things like net of HST, because the municipality does get a rebate on the HST they pay, so they only charge net of HST. Municipality is allowed to carry interest charges on a program from its inception until 120 days after the completion. So there is an estimate in there for things like interest charges, etc. Also, there's a line item in there for Dillon consulting fees, and it was carried in the draft report and is in the final as well. Another way to look at costs is to boil them down to the net that will be borne by the watershed or the private lands. So this slide indicates how we start with the total cost of the project. If we deduct the special assessments to the various agencies and to the local municipalities or to the province, the county, you can see we get down to a balance of 2.912 million, or 918 million, pardon me, from the 5.265, which is about 55% of the cost. If we take into consideration all the lands that we are aware of based on our latest investigation prior to filing the report that qualify for the 1/3 provincial grant, you can deduct another 700,000 roughly, and then when you deduct the allowances, the net amount of the cost to the private lands in the watershed boils down to about $1.54 million, or 29% of the total estimate. And the percentages are to the right. So bottom line, less than 30% of the total estimated cost will be borne by private lands. Little information on assessment and allowances. There's various sections of the Act. Sections 21 to 28 deal with assessments. Sections 29 to 33 of the Act deal with allowances for such things as right-of-way, damages, loss of access, etc. All of them are explained in fairly good detail, hopefully, in Section 11 of the report. They've been calculated using the Todgham method, And we do have some information that we can present a little bit later that will result in individuals being able to see their net assessment compared to their gross assessment. To that end, we've included a couple of slides as requested by staff for individuals to know how they would determine their net assessment. This is an example of an agricultural property that does in fact qualify for the 1/3 OMAFRA grant, and that is available if the properties are assessed under the farm class tax rate. You must be assessed under the farm class tax to qualify under the OMAFRA ADIP policy for the 1/3 grant. And given the timeline on this project, if you do not currently pay that or qualify for that, there's probably lots of time to register for that so that if you are agricultural, you could procure the grant. So in this example, the gross assessment was $3,600, deduct $1,200, or the 1/3 for that grant. In this particular example, we've indicated that the property was given $350 in allowances for damage or whatever the case might be, as indicated in Appendix A1, with a net assessment of $2,050. On this next example, this would be if it was the same assessment for a non-ag property. So you can see that the OMAFRA grant is $0, still the same amount for allowances with a net assessment of $3,250. Next steps. It's taken a lot of time and effort, and I know council has been involved in this project for a long time, since about early 2005. We know that this drain has existed since 1903, with no major improvements to it since the last report in 1954 and 56. But now that we're here at this meeting to consider what are the next steps in the process. So after this meeting, if the report, and once the report is approved by council, there are 2 readings given to a bylaw that is referred to as a provisional bylaw. Then there'll be a notice sent to all of the landowners who received a copy of the report and own property in the watershed, indicating the date, place, and time of a meeting called the Court of Revision. The Court of Revision is explained in the staff report and where you can find forms to lodge a complaint and the timelines to do so. The Court of Revision is a mandatory step in the process under the Drainage Act. There are other avenues of appeal, but they are optional. After all of the appeals are disposed of, there is a 3rd and final reading given to the bylaw, and it is then adopted. The project would then be eligible to be tendered. Once it's tendered and a contractor is selected, depending on the prices or the amounts bid, the project can be constructed. Once we ensure that we have all permits, we may, in fact, even for some strange possible reason, I shouldn't say strange reason, for some possible reason, we may have to get some permits reissued because they may have lapsed. There is the possibility of that happening on a project of this magnitude and when it takes so long to construct. Once all of the construction has been completed and the holdback and the warranty periods have expired, then the costs can be finalized, a grant application can be processed, and the municipality can then pass another bylaw or a levying bylaw in accordance with sections 85 to 90 of the Drainage Act, or that will amend the costs. Mayor Dolan and council and staff, thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope we went through that quick enough, but gave enough explanation. And again, to remind everybody that this presentation will be posted on the website, and Dawn and Natalie and I would be pleased to try to answer any questions as per the approved agenda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dixon. I'm going to start asking a couple that I've been asked on the phone since the letter went out with the report. And the first one would be, why did we mail a 1,000-page document out to every resident in the benefiting area, as opposed to, say, an executive summary?
There's no right or wrong way to do that. We made an executive or a decision. We felt that it is better, and I have always felt in my 36, 37-year career, to be transparent and disclose all of the information, the calculations and everything. So we felt it was probably a better decision to disclose all of the information and contain all of that in a report. There is a more succinct version of it available in print if landowners wish to pick a copy up at customer service that only contains the Appendix A, B, and D, and the drawings.
Thank you. And if somebody was interested in learning more about the Drainage Act in particular, like why, how it came to be, and why it is the way it is, and common law about water and sheet flow and so on, where would they get that information?
There's several resources available. First of all, there's a gentleman sitting over there by the name of Jeremy Ninehouse, who's your drainage superintendent. He has been trained and taken the drainage superintendent's course. At the drainage superintendent's course, participants learn information about the common law and about statute law, which is the Drainage Act, which was originally enacted under a different name in 1835. So it has existed for quite a substantial period of time. There are fact sheets available on the OMAFRA, Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs website, and or you could speak to the Drainage Program Coordinator at the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. The gentleman that used to hold that position up until December, Sid Vanderveen, has recently retired. His replacement is Tim Brook.
Thank you. We did have Sid here. I think we were his last appointment before he retired. He was here in early January to help some of the new council understand the Drainage Act. And certainly we, where we are in the Greater Golden Horseshoe, if you live in the Chatham-Kent area or in southwestern Ontario, practically all of the residents are quite familiar with the drains. Around here, where a lot of our residents move from the GTA, maybe not heard a lot about the drain and wondering why they're captured in this particular process, and why it's not just captured in the general levy like many other things. So that kind of information is going to be really important for people. So my final question, and then I'll open it up to council, and that was just on the next step. So the 3 appeal processes that are available to people. First of all, the opportunity tonight to talk about the drainage report and maybe identify anything, questions or things that they think are either correct or incorrect with that particular report. But when it comes down to, I've been assessed this much money and my neighbor's been assessed this much money, and how come? Where would I go with that type of a question?
Well, I suppose they could contact myself, and I could try to explain that to them. But if they have a concern regarding the amount that they've been assessed, there is information in your staff report regarding how they can launch or process or file an appeal to the Court of Revision. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss the general aspects of the report, the details of the construction, the proposed design, and the general information regarding the costs. Any matters about specific costs are supposed to be left until the Court of Revision, but we can deal with general costs about questions about that.
Thank
Does that
you.
answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much, Mr. Dixon. Other members of council, questions? Seeing none, then we'll now open a public consultation where any landowners, excuse me, I guess I have to do the recommendation first, my apologies. So the recommendation to receive for information, the delegation, it's moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Ices. All in favor? Thank you. Now, we will open a public consultation where any landowner affected by the drain may come to the podium to speak. Each person will have 2 minutes so that everyone will have an opportunity. If you require more than that time, you may come back to the podium for a second time, but only after everyone has had at least one opportunity. We don't have as large a crowd tonight as I thought we would, so I don't think there's going to be a problem that way. I would also like to emphasize that this is not the time or process to appeal your estimate. That would be, as we've heard, in front of the Court of Revision, but to deal with questions regarding the engineer's report. As a landowner speaks, staff will try to highlight the topic and/or questions on the screen. And once we have a few concerns or issues identified, we can ask staff or the consultant to respond to those. So if you wish to speak, please come to the podium and please state your name and address for the record. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kunze.
Yes, my name is John Kunze. I'm a drainage engineer, about the same vintage as Jeff Dixon. I think I maybe have 1 or 2 more years than he does. I'm appearing here this evening on behalf of Boris Horodinsky. Boris couldn't attend the meeting this evening. He had other commitments. I've been working with Boris since about 2013 when the original report came out, and he wasn't real satisfied with what was there. Both Boris and I have reviewed the report in detail. I spent a fair bit of time with him this afternoon going through everything. So my comments are going to be brief. First off, I would like to thank, on behalf of Boris and myself, would like to thank Jeff Dixon, Don McNulty, and Natalie, and the rest of the Burnside team for preparing a report that has finally properly addressed the issues relative to the South Innisfil Creek drain. In October of 2014, I had prepared a summary of the issues that Boris and I had come up with respect to the Dillon report, and I will say that every one of those issues has been addressed and has been addressed adequately. So currently we see no significant issues with the current report. The only spot where there was a little bit of concern in the beginning was the work that was going to be done along 10 Side Road. It certainly wasn't very well laid out in the Dillon report. Jeff and his team have won us over. We understand now what they're doing and the impact it's going to have on Boris's property there, and find the proposal in the report to be in order. The other 2 other issues that have been resolved. One is MTO and Highway 400, and I would like to again thank the town, because I know staff and I believe council as well worked hard, as did Jeff and his team, and it's really encouraging to see that the mess at Highway 400 is finally going to get fixed. Now, when exactly, we don't know for sure, but when you have an engineer's report that says it's going to be fixed, that's way better than what was in the original report by Dillon. The last item, and it was always a really big one, was the $1 million that had been spent on the Dillon report, which of course disappeared. Both Boris and I had expressed numerous times at liaison committee meetings and at council meetings that the disposal of that fee was going to be an issue. We really appreciate the second paragraph on page 51 of the report. Very straightforward way of dealing with the Dillon fee, and we appreciate the effort by the engineer and the town to resolve the issue, and the amount that is going to be levied to the watershed. On behalf of Boris, we have no concern with that. We find that acceptable. So we really have no objection to the report. We want to see it move forward. We're glad to see it's got to this stage. We would like to keep it going. We haven't had a chance to review the assessments in detail, but that, of course, is not what we're here to talk about tonight. We may be back to talk about assessments, but as far as the content of the report and the work that's proposed to be done, Boris is in full support of it and would like to see this move forward. Thank you, Mayor Dolan.
Thank you, Mr. Kunze. Ms. Hogarth.
Good evening, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, councillors, staff, guests, members of our community. My name is Diane Hogarth, 6338 Yonge Street, Churchill, a landowner on the South Innisfil Creek Drain and a member of the South Innisfil Creek Drain Committee, which was formed in 2013 to speak on behalf of landowners who, at that time, oppose the $7 million drainage project proposed by Dillon Engineering. I'm the sole member of our committee tonight, as others are on vacation or out of town. And I'm also speaking on behalf of a number of landowners in the Market Garden area who let us know that they were on vacation or at prior engagements. The Dillon report of 2013 was ordered to be reviewed by the Drainage Court in 2014, and as is probably previously mentioned, Council selected Burnside for the review, and we're now looking at the result produced over the last 4.5 years by Burnside with a price tag of $5 million. Unfortunately, the landowners concerned have only been given a maximum of 8 days to review and understand 5 years of professional work. This is, in our view, too little time to give it the attention it requires to be read and understood. And as I've had to cut my longer speech down, I'm going to be a little bit confused here, but my request is, in light of the enormity of the report and the shortage of time to read it thoroughly, we'd like to request Council to defer this motion until the next Council meeting so that all landowners have a fair chance to digest all this critical information and ample time for their questions to be answered. Now, because I don't have more than 2 minutes to complete what I need to say or what I'd like to say, to put it briefly, over the past 19 years that some of us have been around dealing back and forth with this project, there have been many examples where the town or town employees have demonstrated mismanagement, improper action, and have neglected their responsibilities under the Drainage Act. In some cases, have quite ignored judges' orders. In fact, on several occasions, the town has even acknowledged that improper action, omissions, and responsibilities have been neglected. Section 118.2 of the Drainage Act states in part that owing to any improper action, neglect, or default, or omission of council or any of its employees in the maintenance or repair of the drainage works, or in carrying out the provisions of the Act, the referee or court may direct the whole or any part of costs shall be borne by the municipality and be payable out of the general funds. We, as a committee, on behalf of the landowners, believe that there have been sufficient, numerous times where these have applied, and we would ask that the, sorry, I'm just trying to find where my writing is. I've had to pare this down. We'd ask that the report be deferred, and further, we request council to commence an application to the drainage referee for reconsideration of the allocation of costs under section 118.2. That is to say that the corporation is to pay the drainage project costs out of general funds.
Thank you, Ms. Hogarth. Any other questions? Please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, members of council. My name is Scotty Skolton. I'm a property owner at 6185 10th Side Road. I'm new to the area. I acquired our property in 2016, so I kind of fell into the middle of all of this between Dillon and RJB. So anyways, I'm trying to get caught up to speed here. So originally I was mostly concerned with my personal assessment. I realize this isn't the time to discuss that. So I'm just trying to get a little bit more details here. I'm hoping that Jeff might be able to help out with that. I think there might be regular homeowners like myself that might have the same questions here. As far as general costs go, so I was looking between the Dillon final report and the Burnside final report, and I noticed that there was a large difference between construction costs. I think there was 6.7 million compared to maybe 2.6 million, if I'm reading the information right, Jeff. Okay, good. I need to know that because the way I read it was that it was 6.7 compared to 2.6. So it's 6.7 compared to the 5.6. 5.2. Perfect. Okay, good. So that's the good news, that the cost is actually going down. The big question that I had was the grant money. So I tried going through the 1,000-page document as quick as I could, looking specifically at Appendix A and Appendix B, but I didn't really see any reference to the grant information in there. Was that in there, Jeff?
Sir, maybe if you could address the questions to the chair, and then we will get answers for you.
Sure.
And then I know that Mr. Dixon, unless he's going to be held up for the weather, had agreed to stay behind just a little bit and answer one-on-one questions for people like yourself. But you're asking about the OMAFRA grant, the farm grant?
Yeah, so I read the engineer's final report there, and I couldn't really figure out, I guess, any allowance for assessment regarding a grant. So the first information that I saw was on the slide that that Jeff mentioned this evening there. So as far as the grant goes, is that 100% secured, that there will be access to grant monies to cover off some of the individual assessments?
If you're a farmer, it is, as I understand it, but I will ask Mr. Dixon to answer that question, or Jeremy.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, as long as the properties have farm class tax designation, they will receive the 1/3 grant, and the township takes care of all of that. The landowners do not have any paperwork to file for that.
So, okay, that's good. So as far as the grant goes, so if it is agricultural and we apply for that, that's basically going to get deducted from the individual assessments, correct?
Yeah, and as Mr. Ninehouse said, it's the town that does that. So if you remembered the slide Mr. Dixon showed where it had the cost and then minus any allowances and then minus the OMAFRA 1/3,
Okay.
and that would bring you to your net costs.
Okay, good. The other question that I had too, as far as the estimate for construction went, I think there was a draft and then they gave a revised number this evening. So come tender period, whenever that may be, if construction costs go from, say it was 2.6 million to 3.6 million, then my assumption is everybody's going to get reassessed at that time, correct?
Mr. Dixon, can you talk about the estimate and the contingencies built in and what happens if it's under or over that amount?
Yes, Your Worship. So there is a section in the Drainage Act that requires, once the bids come in for a project, that if they exceed 133% of the engineer's estimate, there's a mandatory meeting must be held to determine if the project proceeds. And the final costs will be determined based on actual and then levied pro rata or in the same proportions to the amounts contained in the assessment schedules. And in those assessment schedules, to answer earlier questions, Scotty, is it?
It's Scotty, correct.
There are, every property that qualifies for the grant, or more particularly that doesn't qualify for the grant, is indicated with a shaded asterisk in the one column in each of the assessment schedules. And how you receive grant is alluded to in the assessment logic presented in the report. But I can talk to you afterwards about that as well.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Council.
Thank you for coming. Other people who'd like to ask question or address council? Thank you, Mr. Pettit.
Good evening. Ross Pittick, I'm speaking on behalf of the Innisfil District Association. We just share some of the concerns about the hastiness of the 1,000-page report coming through, and I think perhaps members of the public who live on those lands not having enough time to go through the report. We also support that this be deferred, this report, until at least the next council meeting to allow a little bit more time to review, both for councillors and for the public, the findings of the report. And we also agree that we should commence an application to the drainage referee to consider reallocation of the costs. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll ask a couple of questions about, so if we were to defer this report, I'm going to ask Mr. Ninehouse or Mr. Inwood to talk about costs of doing that and how those costs would be borne.
Through you, Your Worship, I just want to clarify the difference between deferring the report, as in deferring it back to the engineer, and holding off on the provisional bylaw. If we hold off on the provisional bylaw, staff will need to send out another notice for the consideration of the report. Through the Act, we have to have at least 10 days to do that. So it would have to be mailed out right away, basically, in order to facilitate the next council meeting. Costs associated with that would be the mailing of the notice, and then Burnside's time again to come to another one of those meetings.
Thank you. And could you then address the other request to refer back to the drainage referee? Did I hear that right? It was the drainage referee that Ms. Hogarth and Mr. Pittick were asking for? So to take this report and refer it back to the referee and the costs associated with that?
So to you, Your Worship, and if I'm wrong, hopefully Jeff will be able to correct me on this, but every time an appeal is made to the referee, all of those costs become and form part of the drain. So if a landowner wishes to appeal to the drainage referee on the assessments, then it would all form part of the overall cost of the work.
Thank you, Mr. McNulty.
So the initiation of this recent process for the improvements to the South Innisfil Creek Drain was under the order of the drainage referee, and that was reinforced by a second order of the same drainage referee, which resulted in the Dillon report of 2013, which was submitted. The town then went back to the referee, a new referee, to try to get some relief to some of the conditions that were on that, and that followed up by the peer review and to the point where we are now. The intent of the referee, I believe, and I think we believe, I expect the town believes, is that this is now back to the normal process of a Section 78 report, which it is council's responsibility to deal with the process and how the process is evolved. And it would only go back to the referee if there was a serious objection or fault in law about how council dealt with this report. And so obviously, from our perspective, I don't believe there is a fault in law, and that is one of the bases that it would go back before the referee. Anyway, it is council's sort of decision on how you would process with that, but it would be not typical for that to happen.
Don't go anywhere, Mr. McNulty. I have two more follow-up questions on that. Could you speak to the, Ms. Hogarth spoke to the fact that she felt that the town mismanaged during the court order for the first, that resulted in the Dillon report? And could you speak to the allocation of costs of the Dillon report that that this council, or I'm sorry, that the former council made a recommendation? Are you following me at all? Okay, thank you.
So Jeff may jump in on this at the tail end of it as well, relative to the distribution of cost. But obviously, we were not directly involved. Dillons were retained to prepare a report. They prepared a preliminary report, and that was followed by a final report. Not aware of all the details and processes that were in that process. I think the town's decision to go back the third time to the referee and try to get some relief from some of those conditions was a very beneficial decision by this town, and then subsequently to the drainage area and the ratepayers within the drainage area to get some relief from some of those conditions. And so that was a very beneficial move by the town. It followed into the process that we're in now. The final decision, the referee left no conditions on the town how you would deal with this final report. And that's why I think it just falls back under the normal process that is set out in the Drainage Act for a Section 78 report. There was, I think, your question about costs. I think there's a sensitive area, but it is fairly transparent in the report that there was, approximately $1 million of costs, and that were outlined in preparation of those reports. And we have looked at that and tried to determine, as Mr. Quincy had indicated, what value we were able to glean from that past work to the benefit of this drain. And the beneficial portion of that we have included as a distributed cost of the drain. But the part that we were not be able to use has been assigned to the municipality. So the municipality is becoming responsible, as per our report at least, for those costs.
One final question. So if this council chose to give this provisional approval with first and second reading, would residents in the drain still be able to appeal to either the tribunal, which is the kind of more informal, or the actual drainage referee?
So first step is the court of revision, which is mandatory, and as Mr. Dixon indicated, that's a mandatory process that the municipality must go through. And so with respect to assessments, if people were dissatisfied with the decision of the Court of Revision, they can further appeal to the Ontario Drainage Tribunal. If it was complete dissatisfaction with the proposed work, they could appeal to the Ontario Drainage Tribunal. Jeff, I know, could provide a better explanation, and he may wish to step in, but to the drainage referee, it needs to be over a matter of law, a failure on the municipality part to follow the correct processes. So.
Thank you. Other questions, comments, concerns? Mr. Dixon?
Just to offer another bit of information regarding delaying the process, there is opportunity for landowners who wish to proceed to file a complaint with that same tribunal if a council chooses not to adopt a report and proceed with it.
Mr. Van Ber, or Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, 20 years ago I was in council and when it all started. And I was in council till 2010, and then I missed 8 years and I'm here again. And somebody asked me the other day, did council change that much? And I said, no, we're still working with the Drainage Act. It's only been 20 years. But I must say that it's come a long way. It's from the Dillon report, the assessments. I have to be honest, I didn't read the entire report, but I spent 4 or 5 hours on it because I know pretty much from the past what's going on. And I think it's a good report, and I think that we should go ahead with this rather than delay it. There are all kinds of options. Even when we pass it, if we do first and second reading, there is the Court of Appeal. And every time we delay it, it just costs more and more and more and more. And the longer you delay it, the more the landowners are going to pay. So I think we should go ahead with this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just check with see if there's anybody else here in the audience that wants to speak again, and then we'll bring it to council. Thank you, Mr. Torkos.
Your Worship, members of council, staff, guests, and ladies and gentlemen. I was asked, my name is Nick Torkos. I am the owner of Innisfil Creek Golf Course. I get excessive flooding due to the drain and the lack of maintenance over the last 10 years. But I do want to make one point very clear at this moment. Even if the drain was sorted out 10 years ago, without MTO and the culvert being replaced, you couldn't move forward. Now that MTO is looking at replacing the drain soon, based on passing this report, we can move faster and sooner. Any delays to this report will just slow down MTO, and this design I totally approve. They've come a long way. Kudos to Burnside for coming up with all the details and the depth. Kudos to you 100%. And kudos to Jason and to Jeremy for pushing everything through with the MTO. We do not want to delay this. It's a good report. No one's going to challenge the engineering on it. We do not want to waste time on this report and delay MTO. I support going ahead with this report immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torkos. Ms. Hogarth.
Thank you, Mayor. We haven't spoken about how long it's been involved here, have we? You know, many people here haven't gone back into the whole issue. And the whole issue could have been resolved had the department involved gone ahead and repaired the drain with a council budget of $11,000 back in 2001. There was laziness on part of the staff. There was an I don't care. There was I'm not answering your requests. There was, I could go on. I could tell a very descriptive story, but I don't have time. There was a lot of anguish over 3 years, and finally there was a court case, and finally there was more anguish. And finally people started saying, look, you mismanaged this whole thing, you should be paying for it. But slowly things took a turn in that the courts said, okay, Dillon, or council appointed Dillon, or the courts appointed Dillon, and Dillon started his project, and there was a 7-year lag. During that time, maintenance was required by a second referee who said semi-annual inspections must take place. we on the committee examined the records of the town to see those semi-annual inspections, and there were none. There were none that took place. So there were a number of people who were getting very upset that the drain hadn't been cleaned after 3 floods. It hadn't been cleared up. Now we're waiting another 7 years to have what done, maintenance done, and then we get a report of $7 million that it's going to cost. I think that the neglect and the mismanagement was overlooked. It was kind of hidden behind all of the cases that were happening at the time, all of the other problems that were happening at the time. And in our view, it wasn't the landowners that were responsible to pay for the cost of ineptness on the part of the corporation. It wasn't the landowners that were responsible for the delays. It wasn't the landowners that were responsible for anything. Yet, according to the Drainage Act, it's the landowners that have to pay every single cost involved. And so we started asking questions like, is that fair? Is that fair? I mean, it's not even common sense. When somebody makes a mistake and somebody's held out to make that mistake, should they not pay for that somehow? So this whole issue has been shoveled under and forgotten, not dealt with. Oh no, let's not talk about that. And really, folks, we're here to say now, we're not here to say anything critical about the work that Burnside has done. And I hope you know that, Mr. Burnside. We've talked before, and we also agree that Burnside has done a far superior job than Dillon has done. And we don't want to delay this any more than we have to. We would like to see everybody have a chance, all landowners, those who are not here, those who are on vacation, give them another 2 weeks. Do this at the next council meeting so that people have a chance to ask their questions. And in terms of going to the referee and ask, he is the only person, I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, who can say who is going to pay for this in the end, and who rightly should be paying for this in the end, because who is responsible for allowing this project, which could have been finished in 2004, to go to 2019.
Okay, Ms. Hogarth, you're a little bit past your time, and I understand your frustration, but let me just correct a few facts, because I have been at this table as long as since 1994, and I have lived through the whole thing. In 2005, when the referee gave his court order, it was a court order. Mm-hmm. Our hands were tied. This council did not lag or do nothing or were inept. We were under a court order, and it was up to Dillon. Dillon was told, and with the conditions of what the report was supposed to be on, were in Dillon's hands. In 2013, when we got that report, the council of the day said, no, enough is enough. We're going back to the referee to unshackle our hands so that we could come up with something that was more cost effective. Took us a year to get in front of the drainage referee. We went back. We were able to engage Burnside to do a report, and it's not going to go away. The Drainage Act is the Drainage Act. It's very prescriptive. All levels of government are taking part in paying for it. You saw the slide that showed the total cost, and the total cost that ends up at the landowner at the bottom. The town of Innisfil and its residents, its taxpayers, are picking up a fair part of that tab. This council, I have spent hours, days, going after Minister of Transportation after Minister of Transportation. We, 2 weeks ago, had the Parliamentary Secretary, PA Surma, up here to look at the drain, and we finally have MTO on board. And that was after about 2.5 years of letters and meetings and delegations to the ministry, and we finally have them on board to do something. And then the only other comment I'd like to make is we've got some landowners here with pretty significant assessments who are saying, like Mr. Torkos, who's saying go ahead, and he's got a pretty significant assessment. Can I ask Ms. Hogarth how much your assessment is?
Well, my assessment has actually tripled since the Dillon report. And as you know, I live in Churchill, and I'm in the Churchill block, and no one in the Churchill block has high assessments.
So your assessment is?
My assessment, you want to know the number? I think it's $300 and some odd. But I'm not here for me. That's not the reason that I'm here. The reason I'm here is for principle, and is not to blame council. I'm not blaming you or council or anyone. I'm blaming the system that didn't catch the problems when they happened. They could have been avoided had somebody been on their toes, done their job, fulfilled their responsibilities, and none of us would be here today talking about this. The Dillon report wouldn't have happened. The drainage referee, the courts wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have had to go out and do all the work that we did as committee. I wish that it had never happened, but all but for people who were not doing their job. And had that been the case, none of us would be here now talking about that. So that's the only reason, Mayor, that we're insistent on this point, that there is somebody who's responsible, not you, not this council, but the corporation was initially responsible for not following up, for not doing their job. And I just wanted to make that point. If we lose, we lose. I just have to make that point because it's been a thorn in the side of many landowners for many years.
Thank you, Ms. Hogarth. And Mr. Dixon, could I just ask one question before our next speaker, and that is this an issue of maintenance or is this an issue of improving a drain from the 50s?
We are, or have written a report in regards to an improvement to the drain, not maintenance. And as alluded to by one of the previous speakers, if the culverts through the Highway 400 and Reeve Boulevard are not lowered, it is redundant to do much of anything or spend any money on maintenance because they are perched, they are elevated about 0.9 meters or almost 3 feet above where we are proposing the drain bottom. So there's no obstruction to everything east of Highway 400.
Thank you very much. Any more speakers? Mr. Lougheed, welcome back.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just Doug Lougheed, I'm a former councillor, but I represented the area of Ward 1 that included the South Innisfil Creek Drain. I won't say I've walked every inch of the South Innisfil Creek Drain, but I've walked most of the South Innisfil Creek Drain in some pretty inclement weather. So there's a few things that I think council needs to be, that I'm listening at the back. I had no intention of talking tonight. But first of all, the Dillon report, when it came in, was, as I recall, about a $7 million report. That was a 2012 report when it came in. We're talking 7 years later. Using that report and the inflation cost would have been very close to $8 million. So if we had waited 7 years, the cost of that $7 million would have been $8 million approximately now. We've got a report that's in front of us that is slightly over $5 million. And they've included, from what I saw briefly and what I've looked at in the report, of the over $1 million that Dillon charged, that about $800,000 was assessed out to the general tax base of the town, and about approximately around $300,000 was, as I understand it, information that was able to be used by Burnside. 190. Okay. So probably over 80%, and I think, Your Worship, you talked about that, has been allocated to those costs have been taken by the town. Second of all, the assessment, and again, I didn't go back and look at the Dillon report. As I said, I hadn't intended on speaking tonight. But as I recall, in just my recollection, the assessments out to the landowners of the Dillon report was somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million that was going to be allocated to the landowners at that point in time. And the rest of it was by the government agencies and et cetera, province of Ontario, town of Innisfil, county of Simcoe. But as also said tonight, the thing that was the impediment was the 400 crossings. They were never dealt with, and I was part of, as Your Worship was, over the last, at least my 8 years on council, probably 5 to 8 ministerial delegations that we dealt with that. And we got stonewalled, and ultimately, kudos to the town and Mr. Inwood and Jeremy that we've got some movement on there, and I think it's a solution. And I must admit, the first time I toured that drain, the solution was proposed by Mr. Hordinsky was exactly the same solution that's in there now of the intermediate of the temporary drains that's bored under, and then ultimately when 400 is constructed. So the expertise was there. As far as the town doing no maintenance, I object to that because I sat in this council for 8 years and saw the budgets. Now, was there a lot of money that was spent on the town, on the drain? No, there wasn't a lot of money spent on the drain because the drainage report was what they were waiting for. There was going to be new schematics, there was stuff. But I do recall line items in there of maybe 30,000 or 50,000, something like that being spent on maintenance of the drain year after year after year. And if the town was negligent in one way, and from what I understand, is some of the times that they spent the money and maintained the drain, it was going to cost more to send out 1,000 letters and 1,000 assessments of 20, if you're talking some of the Churchill properties, 25 cents a piece or $3 a piece or whatever it was to do to the landowners. It was going to cost more just sending out for a minimal amount of money than it was to do the work. And sometimes the town, maybe they should have done the work and build it out, because it would at least show some of the landowners that the work was done, because there was work done, and I saw it each and every year. If you went back and looked at 2012, 2013 budgets that I was at, 2016, they're all there. So I think that this report, again, I wished I had the two to compare. But the landowner portion of what they're being asked to pay is $2.6 million or something like that. I forget what Jeff's presentation was, but you got a $5.2 million final report estimate, and the landowner costs, everything else is being taken up by government agencies and grants, and the reduction has been significant to anybody that looks at their costs pre and their costs after. Now, there might be some adjustment with Ms. Hogarth's going up a little bit. I don't know why that is, but it was maybe that the Churchill residents who are up at the hill, up on the top of the hill, had to pay more to the downhill landowners. I don't know whether that's the reason. But I think from what I read, it's a good report. The delay has saved millions of dollars, and probably a construction project that can be done a lot faster. But the most important thing is you got the MTO on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lahi. Is there any more questions or comments? Mr. Wardlaw.
Your Worship, members of council, members of the public, I'm not as long-winded as my former ward. I'm a former ward councillor as well in Ward 1. I'm not as long-winded as Mr. Lougheed, so you're going to be blessed with that. I've also spent a fair bit of time looking at this issue over the years, dealing with residents, and as I sit here tonight and look at what's proposed, I think we have to move forward, and I think we need to move forward tonight. Otherwise, the costs just keep adding up, as Councillor Van Berkel mentioned, and they've already been adding up for a number of years as it is. And we keep spending more money on engineering fees and other fees. And I think I'd just like to advise council that I think we should move forward tonight and get this project done. It'll take a couple of years by the look of things. And the sooner we get it done, the better. And I am, my assessment on several pieces of properties has gone down compared to the Dillon report as a farmer, and I appreciate that. I'm an upstream farmer, and so I really don't see a benefit, but I know I'm contributing to that, and I think we need to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wardlaw. Seeing no more, is there any more comments from council? Councillor Sadi.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question to Jeremy or maybe Mr. Dixon. I know delays always, we're talking about increased costs because there's always a factor in that. But is there the OMAFRA grants? The government's always changing all the time. Is there a chance that the OMAFRA grants that would be available to residents wouldn't be there with longer delays? Is this a guaranteed grant? Is there a time frame with that? Anybody looking for direction? Thank you.
Mr. Dixon.
Through your worship to Councillor, there is no guarantee. The Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs has a budget every year that they allocate to the three prongs that deal with drainage. One is the grant program for the capital projects, such as this would fall under. One is the grant program for drain maintenance projects, the same 1/3 for agricultural lands under the farm class tax rate. And the other is the grant program for the cost of employing a qualified drainage superintendent. So they do review that annually. That could change with a subsequent government, but for the time being, there is a budget. And what has happened in the past, example, I believe the drainage superintendent from Bradford West Gwillimbury is here, and I believe when the Holland Marsh drain was done, it had to have its grant paid over a couple of claims, and it affected the budget because the grant for that drainage project almost exceeded the entire budget of OMAFRA for capital works in that particular calendar year. So it is not guaranteed, but there has not been an instance yet where it has not been paid.
Thank you. Councillor Ices?
I have some comments about this topic, but I'm not sure if we're speaking on the motion or in the public consultation part of the meeting.
So I think what we'll do, Mr. Ice, or Councillor Icy, sorry, is pass the hopefully pass the recommendation to receive the Burnside delegation, and then we'll move on to the recommendation, and then if you have your comments then. So a mover and a seconder to receive for information, Councillor Fowler and Councillor Ices, all those in favor? And a big thank you for that very informative presentation, very much appreciated to Burnside. Okay. Next, we have the staff recommendation, which is in front of you. This is in regards with the drains. So what this does is sets out that as we were talking about throughout the presentation, to give first and second reading to the bylaw, which starts the clock ticking in the process as prescribed by the Drainage Act. It also sets out the council's or staff's recommendation for council's approval, the names put forward to be on the Court of Revision that would hear the all of the people who appealed to the Court of Revision. So I want to ask now for questions and comments on this. Oh, and I need a mover and a seconder first. Right. Councillor Fowler. Seconder? Councillor Ices. Comments or questions on the recommendation as on the screen? Councillor Ices.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So as I am new to the council table, I've been warned a few times that this matter was coming, and I guess the comments I'd like to make first of all is with regards to the Drainage Act itself. As a farmer, and oftentimes I bump into other farmers from other provinces or states, and they don't have this type of legislation that protects the land from erosion. It protects productive land in a way that we can grow food for ourselves, and that helps us as society as a whole. So I know there's a lot of frustration with this issue and the way it's gone, and there's been a few twists and turns, but my overall comment would be with the value of the Drainage Act, and it's good to see that it feels like we're getting this issue back on track, and it can follow its regular course of action. So with those comments and hearing the positive comments about the report, I went through it for a little while, and it is a very in-depth report. So I appreciate the comments about those frustrations about not having enough time to deal with this. But I also think and agree that we need to move forward on this. So I will be voting in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Any other hands? Councillor Arsetti.
Just through your worship to Jeremy, the minimum and maximum date on item number 3 for court revision. This is the minimum date that we can have, and what's the maximum date it could be?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Rosati. So once the provisional bylaw is given first and second reading, staff will need to send out a notice for the sitting of the Court of Revision. Under the Act, we have a time frame of 20 to 30 days. So what you see on the screen there as March 21st would be the 20-day period, but it could be extended to the March 31st.
So just follow up then, extending it to the March 31st would give additional time for the residents to read that report.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, it would give additional time, but I must state that the 31st is a Sunday.
There is the ability to mail the provisional bylaw within 5 days as well.
Go ahead, Mr. Inwood.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm looking at the calendar and considering what a delay would mean, and we have 10 days to work with here. Given that the 31st is a Sunday, the 29th would be the Friday. I would also recommend, and perhaps someone on council can make the amendment here, but I would recommend that we approve 2 days, whether it's the 21st and 22nd or some other set of days, but I think we should recommend 2 days here to be confirmed for quarter revision. Given that, I feel like we should be cautious with how much time we might need for the quarter revision. We're talking about 800 plus property owners. We could see a fairly significant number of folks come through, and even at 2 days, I'd be a little concerned if we are running this right to the very last minute, that we wouldn't be able to get everything in. So at a best, I would recommend we would be looking at early in the week of the 25th, 26th, 27th, thereby giving us a delay of an additional 4 or 5 days at best. Anything beyond that, I would have some concerns around our ability to complete the works that the quarter revision will have to do.
Can I just ask a question about if we had 2 dates and it was, say, one near the beginning and one near the, like, say, the following week, say the 21st and the 28th, does that change the date that all appeals must be filed to the town clerk?
To you, Your Worship. The date for the appeals to be filed is based off the first sitting.
Okay, Council, so we've got 10 days to play with here, keeping in mind that, as Mr. Inwood said, that we don't want to run out of time at the back end of it either. What's your preference? Is there any amendments to this, or are we going to vote on the recommendation as it is, as it stands? Councillor Sadi.
I'm in favor of the recommendation. I just think that if we can adjust the date a little, it just gives a little bit more time for residents. I see Mr. Inwood indicating. Do you have a suggestion, Mr. Inwood?
Mr. Inwood.
Through Your Worship, maybe not so much of a suggestion, but I just want to make sure I share all the appropriate information with Council as you consider this. I know we're talking about 10 days, but 10 days, when we talk about the timing of MTO's works and getting them going, every day is a delay on getting MTO started. They're waiting to hear how things go this evening. They will proceed with their works once we get all the appropriate approvals in place. Staff have made this recommendation. Jeremy and myself had quite a discussion about this. We have made this recommendation of proceeding on the 21st, and as I mentioned, adding the 22nd. For good reason. There are plenty of balls up in the air that are all hinging on when we get things started here.
Councillor Sadi.
Thank you, Your Worship. Then on that updated information from Mr. Inwood, I would, recommend this date, the Thursday, March 21st, because I would hate to see anything happen that MTO, watching this or listening, decides not to fund their portion, which then would fall on all taxpayers to pay that portion.
Could I ask someone, though, to make an amendment to add Friday, March 22nd, or another alternate date so that we have 2 dates on there? Councillor Van Berkel and seconded by Councillor Fowler as an amendment. And while we're having that discussion, my other thought is it takes, a day to get this in the mail, and it takes a couple of days for people to pick up their mail. What are the options as far as the town's communications about getting communications out quickly so that people know to watch in their mail for this? Or are we able to do some kind of a proactive communication to let people know that this is coming up, expect this in the mail, and if you want to appeal your assessment, to make sure that you get it into the town quickly? Mr. Rayner?
Your Worship, members of council, certainly we have a number of channels, including our newspaper page that we have a holding position on, so we could certainly add something to that, as well as our social media channels and Facebook, so we can push that out as soon as possible.
Councillor, or Mr. Inwood?
Not Councillor. Your Worship, I do want to just share with everybody, with Council, that we do have a fairly significant contact list associated with landowners on the drain, with email addresses and contact information that we will immediately send out confirmation of the provisional bylaws and try to get direct contact with the landowners in advance of the mail arriving.
Okay, we've had significant discussion. I appreciate everybody's attention, especially all you poor people who are waiting for the Tollendale discussion who had to sit through the Drainage Act. I want to thank everybody who came out tonight to voice your opinion, either for or against. Everybody's voices in Innisfil matter. So thank you for being here. And I'm going to call the question, and I'm going to ask for this to be a recorded vote, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. With a recorded vote, we'll start, well, perhaps we can start, and we'll just move alphabetically through members of council, finishing with Deputy Mayor and Your Worship. When I call your name, please state for or against. Starting with Councillor Ices.
For.
Councillor Fowler.
For.
Councillor Nicol, absent. Councillor Sadi.
For.
Councillor Payne.
For. For.
Councillor Van Berkel.
For.
Deputy Mayor Davidson.
For.
And Your Worship.
In favor. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. I think it was 2000 that land flooded, so I think you can all appreciate this has been a long process to get this far, and we're not over yet. There's still 3 appeals to go through. So now we'll move on, if we can, please, to our next presentation. And again, I want to thank all of the Tollendale people for being so patient, and invite Mr. Claire Ripma and Mr. Sid Tursma from the Tollendale to come and make their delegation. And perhaps we'll just give it a minute just to clear out, if you wouldn't mind, gentlemen. Thank you.
No, I know that. I'm not important.
Maybe when you start up again, just...
Okay, so we're going to get started, and if I could just ask the people that are out in the hall to, because the door's open, maybe we could just keep it down a wee bit so we can hear the presentation, and that's great. Thank you. Whenever you're ready, we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Rest
Oh, great.
assured. Rest assured.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of council. My name is Claire Riepman. I'm the planning consultant for Tollendale. And I asked the clerk to hand out my speaking notes, which is a double-sided piece of paper that looks like this. Tonight I'm here before you to ask you to pass the resolution that would approve the Tollendale project, and that is item D1 in your agenda tonight. Now, first of all, I would like to commend town staff for their professionalism and the work that they've put into this application. We have, as planners, reached different conclusions, and as planners, we've agreed to disagree, and there's nothing wrong with that. I would like to pick up 3 quotations from your staff report. The first one is that staff acknowledged that the proposed development has many planning merits and the backlog of affordable seniors housing is substantial. The second one is that staff agree that the proposal can be considered to be a public service facility. And the third one is that there are no concerns about the application from a technical perspective. Those are
Mr. Rittman, unfortunately, people at the back are not hearing, so we are going to have to recess for just 60 seconds while they lower that wall. I apologize.
Do I need to restart?
I'll ask the audience. Did you want him to start from the beginning again? Yes, I'm getting nods, yes.
Oh.
If you can sit through an hour of drainage talk, we can sit through Mr. Rietman's starting over again.
And hopefully I'll be just as interesting and cogent the second time. It's very silent. I think I can start, right? Okay. So I'm speaking on behalf of Tollendale, and we're asking council to approve the Tollendale application. It's item D1 in your agenda tonight. First of all, I wanted to commend your staff for the professionalism that they've shown and the work that they've put into this application. While we as planners have reached differing conclusions, and as planners we've agreed to disagree, there's nothing wrong with that. There are 3 quotations or 3 conclusions from your staff comment that I want to pick up. First of all, your staff acknowledge that the proposed development has many planning merits and the backlog of affordable seniors housing is substantial. The second quote is that staff agree that the proposal can be considered a public service facility. And the third one is that there are no concerns about the application from a technical perspective. The only problem that staff can identify is that this project is not located within a settlement area in the official plan. And technically, that's true, except that in real life, it's not true. The city of Barrie is fully developed with urban development right across the road. Bus service, a retail plaza close by, municipal services have been agreed to. There's a state residential development to the east and shoreline residential along the waterfront, and the lands that can't be developed are green. So in reality, this property is not rural at all. It's the classic hole in the donut with urban development all around it. This really is an infilling project. Now, your staff have also expressed concern that the intent of the growth plan does not include a public service facility of this scale in the rural area. The growth plan does permit public service facilities in the rural area. And I'm going to tell you that the growth plan does not contain the word scale. So we question whether your staff mean that you can only put a small hospital in the rural area, but not a big one, a small sports complex, but not a big one, when you see the word intent in a report, you should know that what follows is pure speculation. The language of the growth plan does not support a conclusion that is based on scale. Now, I don't propose tonight to argue the nuances of planning policy. If you're interested, you can read my planning justification report. For a planner like me, it's very exciting reading. For the rest of humanity, not so much. In summary, we all agree that there are no concerns about this project from a technical perspective. We also agree that it has many planning merits and addresses the affordable seniors housing issue. And there is no doubt that the local neighborhood and the community largely and overwhelmingly support it. So I'm here before you tonight to ask for your approval. The staff, at the end of their report, have provided an alternative resolution for you to adopt. And I won't read it, but I have put it in italics at the end of my piece of paper. And I'm happy to answer any questions at this point. And if there are hard questions, I've got Sid with me who will answer them.
Thank you very much. Can I ask members of council, are there any questions for either Sid or Claire? Seeing none, I thank you very much for your presentation, and we will be deliberating this item this evening. So for those in the audience who are interested, you're welcome to stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the recommendation is that the delegation regarding Tollendale Village 2 application staff be received as information, and that's moved by Councillor Sadi and seconded by Deputy Mayor Davidson. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Council. So now we move on to the County Council or any municipal association updates, any committee reports or anything from anyone? Seeing none, I have one. We did not have a county council meeting in the last section, but I did attend my second police services board meeting, and can I tell you that I still have a lot to learn, but I'm starting to learn a few things. Our new collision reporting center that got up and running a few weeks ago got a really good workout the last couple of days. And it's, as I understand, went without very few hiccups, and it does definitely allow for more policing. And in one case, we've of encouraging news. We've got the frontline folks understanding that traffic is a real concern and aggressive driving to our residents, and they've actually over this past year managed to double the manage of tickets that they wrote. And one alarming statistic was the number of 911 missed dials, and that we have to do some more work on getting people not to use the 911 number unless it truly is an emergency. And that's my takeaway from my police services board meeting. Anyone else have any meetings? Seeing none. Next, we'll go to the consent list, where we will go through the list of all the reports. If they are pulled, we will have a debate on them. If they're not pulled, they'll be deemed at the end to be that the staff recommendation is to be confirmed. So the first item is item A1. That's the adoption of the minutes for the special council meeting on February the 13th. I don't intend to pull it, but I just want to, oh, sorry. Unless you wanted to pull it, Councillor, no. So I just wanted to say thank you for all of the people who put their name forward to be on our volunteer lists from our different ad hoc committees. We got a really good uptake, and it's really great to see all the people that we can call on when we need to. A2, the regular council meeting minutes of February the 13th. There's no reports from various committees in standard requests. We've got item C1, appointment to the Museum on the Boyne Advisory Committee. Thank you, Councillor Payne. C2, council member appointment to the Farmers Advisory Ad Hoc Committee. I look forward to starting a new committee. Councillor Ices, did you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I am honored to be chair of that committee, and we've had some discussions about our upcoming strategic planning process, and as a town, how we want to include our farmers, their concerns, and their thoughts for the future, as that process will give us a feel for what Innisfil will look like in the future. So we look forward to people, farmers, those in rural Innisfil to apply to that committee, and I look forward to working with them.
Thank you, Councillor. Next is staff reports. Staff report D1, the Tollendale Village 2. Councillor Orsatti?
Refer.
Referred by Councillor Orsatti. Next is the staff report DSR 02519, which is the final 2019 and 2020 operating and capital budgets. Deputy Mayor?
Defer.
That's deferred. Item D3, staff report regarding pets in the workplace policy update. Councillor Ices?
Defer.
Item E, our QP collective agreement bylaw. Seeing none, there is no correspondence for action this evening. Correspondence for information, our correspondence list. We have two pieces of correspondence. G1 from the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, Provincial Oral Health Program for Seniors. It's an advocation piece. And G2, correspondence from the County of Simcoe regarding age-friendly seniors housing grant program. I just want to highlight that perhaps for our communications folks, this is a good news piece. It's a grant application where people can apply to get grants to modify their homes for better accessibility. And the next item is supplementary. H1, correspondence from our MPP regarding Tollendale 2. H2 is correspondence from our MP about Tollendale 2. H3, the transitional matters with the Our Shores Agreement. H4, that would be regarding the Stroud Innisfil Community Center community engagement results. I think we should just highlight that, just to say that the results were that the majority of the people that came out felt that there were, actually, I am going to pull that one, sorry. All right, so now we need a recommendation that the consent list for February 27th, except for the recommendations that were pulled and referred to committee. That's Councillor Van Berkel and Councillor Payne. All those in favor? Carried. And a motion to resolve to committee. Moved by Councillor Van Berkel, seconded by Councillor Orsatti. All those in favor? That's carried. So now we're in committee of the whole, and Councillor Orsatti, you deferred the Tollendale 2.
Thank you. Do I need a seconder to discuss this one? No. I do. And Deputy Mayor Dan Davidson is my second. I just want to refer this one because the staff recommendation is to refuse the application, although staff speak quite favorably about the application. And I just made some notes for myself in reading this report and the previous ones that, I recognize that planning staff have to follow their policies and guidelines and report accordingly to council. And we all recognize that there is an affordable housing crisis in Simcoe County. And as a municipality, we need to support low-income housing needs and remove barriers to meet these needs by looking at our zoning and incentives to meet the needs. And Tollendale stats show that the current waiting list is over 2 years, and that encompasses 1,500 seniors to date. The longer the delay, the longer the wait, and more seniors on that list. This project has identified the protection of the lands to preserve the significant woodland and wetlands portion, and that was a concern that I had, and that's been addressed. And staff concern, I felt that they had a valid one to open the door to other developers. Using outside of settlement areas with cheaper land is a valid one. But I think that that is limited to none that would include long-term care beds and memory unit beds in their projects in development. And suggestions to look at alternative settlement areas, I can think of none in Innisfil that would be able to provide both the water and wastewater services and full transit services. And the partnership with Barrie is a valid first step in shared services to address this problem. Both the provincial policy statement and growth plan permit public service facilities, including long-term care complexes. In certain cases, I believe this is one of those times, and I'm in full support of this project to address the need for affordable housing. Staff have made a note in the report that if council wishes to support the proposal, I'm recommending that we as council take that option with the official planned amendment. There is a note in here, though, of the long-term care facility with a maximum of 160 beds, and I just wonder, do we want to limit ourselves or limit Tollendale to the maximum of 160 or leave that more open? Comment on that.
Councillor Sadi, so just clarification, the recommendation on the screen is to refuse the application. Was that the recommendation you were moving?
No.
Or what did you want to propose an alternate recommendation?
I am proposing the alternate recommendation that staff have the supporting. Let me just check that one.
We'll just let council read that for a moment. And I didn't see who Councillor Sadi's seconder was, so.
Deputy Mayor Dan Davidson.
So Deputy Mayor Dan Davidson, you'd have to concur with seconding that motion versus the one that was on the screen that you seconded.
There was going to second recommendation. I'm just concerned here on part 2.
Your mic.
Sorry. I've been quiet all night. I concur to go forward with the recommendation here by staff, but on point 2, there's just one line I'm concerned of. So the council approved bylaw 201-19 to rezone the subject lands at 870 and 902 Big Bay Point Road from agricultural general AG zone to community service exception hold, CS-12H zone, and environmental protection EP zone to permit a long-term continuum care complex and to preserve the existing key natural heritage. That's where I'm concerned, because under Bill 66 coming forward, natural heritage sites are under review. And I think if you look at that particular site, where it shows there's trees, there actually are no trees. And the key hydrological features, I think that's fine. But would the developer be happy with preserving the existing key natural heritage site?
That's my question before we go forward.
Mr. King or Mr. Rietma? Go ahead.
The plan that we have produced maintains and keeps the whole wooded area on the site and has a 100-foot buffer that we've worked out with the Conservation Authority and staked it. So there's no effect on that natural heritage area. So we're good with that.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it answers my question, so I'm prepared to move forward with that recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Osadi's assessment. I was a little bit disappointed, not with the actual report, because I think the report was excellent. Staff did a great job, but with the recommendation, I would have thought that they would have recommended that, yeah, there are some hoops and there are some potholes in the road, but the developers are willing to jump over them and get this thing done, and we should do everything in our power to help them, because it is an absolute wonderful thing that's going to be needed even more by the time it's done than it is now. So I am wholeheartedly in support of this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fowler.
When you put this down into a nutshell scenario, you're in essence at no cost to the town, you're creating a greater environmentally protected land, you're bringing in jobs, you're not putting extra stress on the infrastructure because we're tapping into Barrie's water and sewer. They're creating an environment that is creating low-income housing for seniors, and we get all the benefits for literally just allowing them to use a piece of land. This is, in essence, a golden goose. We have tax income coming in, we got a greater population coming in. Everything is working in the right manner. Sometimes the letter of the law is nice to look at, but there are going to be times that there's going to be exceptions to the rule, and this, in my opinion, is one of them. I fully support it.
Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with the comments that have been made so far by the others. I'd like to speak a little bit to the zoning change, and as a farmer who farms obviously on agricultural land, that's always a concern to people that, hey, you're taking agricultural land and you're giving it up to development. And I know we don't think of sometimes as a community facility as development, but that's what we're doing here. And I think if you drive by where that property is, it's abundantly clear that as far as it being used to a farmer or a society as for food production, or it has very limited potential there. So for us to approve this type of facility using that land that is marginal at best, in my opinion, I think that's a positive thing to do. So I will be voting to this recommendation in favor of changing the zoning.
Mr. Rayner.
Thank you, Worship, members of council. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the good folks at Tollendale. My conversations with them have been very productive and particularly focused on Tollendale 3, 4, 5, and 6, which I think we are very excited to have in Innisfil in the future. And thanks to our planners, we have a number of sites that are within settlement boundaries that we would be very excited to discuss with them in the future. I think the need is significant, as council has said, but we really ought to not think about just one Tollendale, but what are we doing globally? And we've had some conversations with our folks at Tollendale, and we're excited to continue those conversations. Thank you, Worship.
Councillor Payne.
I hate being the last man standing. Anyway, I just want to, excuse my voice. I just want to say that I take my hats off to the landowners for doing this. I think this is a great idea. Not only does Innisfil want it, we need it, and it's going to be a good thing. It's going to be. They talk about the location and being in a hub of the community, and it will be the hub of the community. I just think it's great, and I look at where we have what we have in Innisfil already. 48 years ago, in 1971, Sandy Cove Acres Limited built a seniors community that was affordable for seniors, that was on an agricultural land and wetlands. And to this day, it's considered a community hub. So this is something that is needed, and I take my hat off to you. I thank you very much for doing this.
Okay, seeing no more, I just had a couple of comments here. So the first is to our planners. I have a great deal of respect and appreciate that their opinion. We up here have the luxury of bowing to popular opinion. We also have the luxury of voting with our emotions and our hearts, where our planners are required to follow their professional designations and read the Planning Act and support the policies as they see them. I can tell you that if this was any other use, if it was a normal housing complex or another development, I would not be in favor of it. And I would go as far as to say, even if it was an unproven group, if it was a group that said, tell you what, we're going to build this amazing, affordable community, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would even then struggle with the approval. Do I wish it was more in the Innisfil community and less in the Barrie community? I do. And I further Mr. Rayner's comments about Tollendale 3 and 4 being more a part of Innisfil as opposed to on the edge of Innisfil. And then my final comment, and the Deputy Mayor brought it up earlier, was regarding Bill 66. We sat in this house a few weeks ago and had people, so upset about Schedule 10 of Bill 66, and it was going to poison our water. And I use the example of what if Amazon H2 were to come here, would we use Bill 66 Schedule 10? Well, the Open for Business Act, this would have been a perfect example of how we could have used the Open for Business Act to bring something like this in line with planning policies. I still think there's going to be a hurdle at the county. I've read the comments in the report that Simcoe County have made, but we'll cross this bridge one step at a time. So I'll call for the vote. All in favor of the motion? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item is our budget, our final budget. Thank you. Maybe we will just take a 1-minute recess now then. Thank you. we missed one. We'll reconvene. Item D2 was the deputy mayor. Can we go back one on the screen there, please? There we go. Thank you. Deputy mayor, you need a mover and a seconder?
Mover? Okay, a second. Okay.
Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Deputy Mayor Davidson. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had some other intentions for this budget. However, at this time, I am going to ask for a recorded vote. But I just want to bring to the attention that this new system that was presented to a new council was a little bit heavy, and I think this new council and myself did not have enough time to get to the nuts and bolts of the budget. We're taking some feedback from the public, which I truly appreciate. It's not the best budget in my books. I hope the next process is done a little better. The binder was a dog's breakfast. I don't want to go through another binder like that again in the next time of budget process. I'd like to see things a little bit more contained. And I'd also like to see some past history so we can look back at that and see the growth that's impacted our taxpayers. So at this time, I'd just like to ask for a recorded vote. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions on the budget? So I would ask then, Deputy Mayor, that perhaps you, because we did spend 2 full days on the budget here at the council chambers, but if there's specific things that you didn't see or that you wanted to see in the budget, to please ask staff. They're always looking for a more user-friendly model for us. It's not an easy thing to go through, but I'm sure they'd be happy to take your suggestions on how to make it more user-friendly.
Follow up. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I actually had a conversation with Lockheed this afternoon, and I think we can sit down with the finance department and look at a better way to bring it to council the next time so that we're not flipping from page 700 to page 2 10 times in a night. And there was a process we had before that was much easier, so I'll work with them over that. Thank you.
I did want to comment that I thought the sessions that we did on what we called the speed dating was really beneficial. I thought that was a great use of time, although it did require a lot of staff time. It was wonderful to have the opportunity to dig in and ask specific questions around each department. So thank you to staff for that. Any other questions or comments? Did staff have any questions or comments, Mr. Rayner? No? Okay, so we've had a request for recorded vote. All those, all those in favor, I was going to say. Mr. Parkin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll again move through council alphabetically, and if you can just say for or against when I call your name. Starting with Councillor Ices.
For.
Councillor Fowler.
For.
Councillor Orsatti.
For.
Councillor Payne.
For.
Councillor Van Berkel.
Favor.
Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Against.
Your Worship.
In favor.
And that's carried.
Next was pulled was item D3, and that was Councillor Ices. You have a mover, seconder, or amended recommendation?
So I guess
You wanted to speak against it, I take it, am I?
I would like to move that we consider in the options alternatives item, or option 4, that we choose not to adopt pets in the workplace policy.
Thank you. And do you have a seconder for that? Deputy Mayor Davidson seconds that. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. I'm going to ask staff to craft something quickly. Mr. Clerk?
Sorry, so the motion is to adopt recommendation number 4 out of the staff report? Is that correct? Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Anyone want to speak to it? Councillor Fowler.
To my understanding, when I read the documentation, they said that to even bring a pet into such a situation, there's not allowed exotic animals. They have to do the documentation. It can't be in an open space. In realistic terms, the animal isn't exposed to the public as a whole very often in contained environments where they are with their owners, for lack of a better term. And as they've had, I believe, as I said before, 8 people do it already. There has been no negative feedback. There's been no incidents. There's no troubles to date. I can't agree with this. I'm sorry. I feel that, you know, if someone wants to bring their pet in and they follow the structure and the proper procedure, it costs nobody any money, and I'd rather focus on something that is more fiscally accountable to the public.
Thank you. Any other comments? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. I did read the report. There was one thing I found in there that the person is not responsible for, and that is fleas. We're in a carpeted building, and if we get fleas into our building and into our carpets, it means the taxpayer of the town will be picking it up. I'd like to know what this report cost us, but no, I'm for option 4. Thank you.
Mr. Rayner?
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure we have a quote for flea problems, but I'm certainly confident in telling Council that in the event that something like that did occur, we would work very hard to find those costs within the operating budget. Staff are certainly the overwhelming majority of staff are in favor of this policy, and I'm certain that if they were posed the proposal, have the policy or not as a result of finding some savings to deal with a potential flea issue, they would be innovative and find some of those solutions to come up with those monies. Thank you.
Councillor Asadi.
Thank you. Through your worship to Ms. Collins, if I can just ask if you've had any negative feedback from staff in regards to this trial period and the percentage of those staff that have been satisfied with it. If you could just start with those questions. Thank you.
Perfect. Through your worship to Councillor Sadi, thank you for the question. So in terms of feedback received from staff on the policy and the program, we did do a staff survey to ensure that all employees had the opportunity to comment. We had a very strong response rate. 70% of employees that responded said they were absolutely in favor of the policy and saw positive benefits from it. The remaining employees, the 30%, the majority of those had comments or recommendations on how we could enhance the policy. Those recommendations have been included in the amended policy. So things such as ensuring there was guidelines in place if someone didn't follow the guidelines from the program. And a very small percentage of employees said that they were not in favor of the program. But I think it's fair to say that we don't expect 100% support of all of our town policies and programs, although we certainly do strive towards that.
Councillor Asadi.
Just as follow-up, clarification, any of the pets are not allowed in company vehicles or out, that may be a question by the public. Are they expecting to see this in a bylaw vehicle or operations snowplow?
Through your
Ms.
worship to
Collins.
Councillor Asadi, the policy does prevent animals from being in town-owned vehicles, as well as public spaces, et cetera, so animals wouldn't be allowed in council chambers. I just wanted to follow up on one of the past questions, so thank you, Mr. Rayner, for answering that, but I'll add slightly to it. The policy does prohibit animals from coming into the workplace if they have a contagious disease or ailment, so fleas would certainly fall under that. And also the policy does say that employees are responsible for any costs that are associated from their animal being here. So that would include any required cleanup, whether that be fleas or waste or whatnot as a result of an animal being here. Thank you.
Councillor Ices.
Yeah, I guess the reason I'd like to explain why I put this motion on the floor. It might sound a little bit old school, but one of our biggest constraints in the workplace is time, and there are so many distractions. I can't imagine being in that tight of space with all the things that are going on around the town. So for us to suggest that having our pets whom we love in there, that they would always behave and not interfere with the time that needs to be spent on an individual's work, I think is maybe a little bit utopian. So that saying there are no costs to allowing a distraction in the workplace. I work with animals all the time. I have pets. We know their character. We know what they will do, but they aren't human. They can't talk, and they can be unpredictable. So those are all the reasons that came to mind when I thought I would put this motion on the floor. I know surveys had been done and staff supported it, but I would sense that in this day and age, it would be hard for someone to honestly say something negative against pets, right? That's something that's like saying something bad against your mother, maybe. I'm not sure. So with all those comments, that's why I will hope that this motion will pass to not allow pets in the workplace. Thank you.
Okay, we'll have one more comment and then we'll draw two more comments and then we'll draw this to a close because we'll end up being criticized for spending more time on the pets bylaw than we did on the budget. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. I think when you did deal with this the last time in previous council, you spent more time on this than you did on another very interesting subject that night. I concur with Councillor Isis that yes, I'm a little bit old-fashioned. Pets are a distraction. There is an impact, as we've heard, in the operating cost, possibly. So I don't like that. I'd rather put some dime somewhere else. And I'm sorry, but you come to work, you received a job, you accepted a job, you knew the stress of the job. You're here to work. I'm sorry. Thanks.
Councillor Van Berkel.
I've got a little bit of a problem with it too. Basically, if somebody brings a dog and somebody else brings a cat, I mean, you know, dog's a dog and a cat's a cat. Maybe they should bring stuffed toys or teddy bears. No, all kidding aside, is there any policy that says what kind of pets? I know that Kevin has a pet cow. Can he bring that, or is it just dogs or cats, or?
Through your worship to the councillor, the policy does prohibit animals that fall under the exotic animal bylaw, so a cow certainly wouldn't be welcome in town facilities. I did want to follow up just quickly on around the benefits of the policy. So there are numerous studies there out there, including our own employee engagement survey, that suggests that an increase in employee engagement does enhance employees' performance. We were also fortunate, based on policies such as our pet policy, to be recognized as one of Canada's best employers for recent graduates. And that's a result of having employees like this that offer increased flexibility. So there are a number of benefits in terms of productivity, but also in terms of attraction and retention of staff.
Mr. Rayner.
Thank you, Worship, members of council. I just want to echo Ms. Collins' comments. and just reiterate that given the experience that we've actually had with this pilot program, the concern I would have with the direction we're going is that it suggests that we aren't interested in the results of a pilot program, that we in fact have made a decision before the pilot program was launched. And that really is a disincentive and a demoralizing effect on a staff. I recall it wasn't that long ago that we didn't think art should be on the walls, that photos shouldn't be at people's desks, and plants shouldn't be permitted, and people shouldn't eat at their desks because really we're making widgets here, and so we need people to punch the clock and produce. The truth is, you have staff who work in a very creative, innovative environment, and you're not going to get projects like Uber and Innisfil Transit and cell towers if what you're looking for are people who can't actually function in an environment that's creative and innovative. So I urge Council to seriously consider the impact on staff's morale. It may seem like a minor situation and a minor policy, but this is the kind of thing that speaks to the culture and the tone, frankly, that you're setting at the top of this organization. Are we a progressive, innovative organization, or are we concerned with counting the widgets and the paper clips? Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Worship. Just want to ask a question about allergies. Do you have any issues with staff when a pet is brought into the building?
Ms. Collins.
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Payne. So as part of the guidelines in the policy, staff are required to consult with the employees within the vicinity of their workspace to ensure that there aren't any allergies or phobias, et cetera, that would impact employees in a negative way. If there is, arrangements would be made to either accommodate the employee with the allergy or that particular animal wouldn't come in.
Okay, so I just want to follow up on this as well. I did come into the building at one time, and I went to speak to one of the staff members, and everybody was in their cubicles, and they were working, and this cute little head came up and sort of nudged my leg, and I didn't realize that there was a little dog there. No noise, no barking, no nothing, just this really happy little puppy, and it was nice. It was nice to see. So it wasn't stopping any production. So I don't have a problem with it.
I'm just going to break in here and say mountain molehill, I guess, is what I want to say. The last council asked all these same questions. And we said, okay, let's give it a 6 months, see if it's a problem. It's a problem, we pull it. It's not been a problem. I am here at least 3-4 days a week. I think I've seen one animal the whole time I've been here. To me, it's a non-issue. The most attention it's got is from employees at the City of Barrie who are asking for a copy of the pet policy because they're hoping that their municipality could be as innovative as Innisfil. Councillor Ices?
I guess I would respectfully disagree with the comments that if this council does not adopt a pet in the workplace policy, that we are somehow anti-innovative thinking and we're producing widgets and we got to punch the clock. I do think that there are definite risks with this and that there are definite distractions. I know it's as I said before, to not want a little puppy or a little kitten around or something like that. It's hard to deny that. Yeah, they're cute, but we also do want us to. I think our residents want a certain work ethic that can get in the way of. I know there will be debate on that, but that is my
my feeling. So thank you.
Thank you. So we've had good debate, and I'm sure we'll hear about it on Facebook. So I'll call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation to not adopt the pets in the workplace policy? All those in favor? Those opposed? That's lost. So is there an alternate motion? Councillor Fowler.
They've already tried it. They ain't broke. Don't fix it. Keep it in place. My opinion. I would say I believe it's option 1. It's been here. People are following the rules. There's been.
Do you have a seconder for option 1, Councillor? Councillor Payne? Okay, sorry, keep talking. I didn't mean to interrupt.
As I said, they did a pilot project. There have been no, crazy attacks. No one's bringing exotic animals. There's processes in place to screen for issues. It's a non-issue. It's already working. It doesn't affect the town as a whole, in my opinion, in a grand fiscal manner. So if the people here are happy and productive, let them be happy and productive, and the town doesn't suffer for it. The town actually prospers for it.
Anyone else want to comment on that, on option? Seeing none, all in favor of option 1? Those opposed? That is carried. Next item is H4. And that was the a memorandum from Stroud and to be received as information. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Because I did want to just make some comments on that. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Ices. So, Mr. Inwood, my questions or comments came to the piece about the, trying to find a place for the seniors. I highlighted it, but of course now I didn't save it. And it was in regards to, here it is, on page 144. The town is looking to create a temporary shared workspace for entrepreneurs and startup companies utilizing the banquet hall space starting later this year. While many seniors express concerns with that purpose, town staff are working to provide this group with similar space in an alternate location in order to accommodate both endeavors, including options such as Lefroy, Churchill, Cookstown. So are you saying in that you're looking to relocate the seniors to Lefroy, Cookstown, or Churchill? Because they're Stroud seniors, and boy, oh boy, is that going to light a bomb. Mr. Inwood?
Yes, Your Worship. We are exploring options that would see the seniors relocate. Mr. Taylor's here, and I'm sure he can weigh in at any point, but we've explored various options for this, I've lost what it's called, but entrepreneurial hub. We've explored various options, including places like Lefroy, Churchill. Unfortunately, the infrastructure requirements in all of those facilities are not there to support the entrepreneurial hub. So we are looking to work with the seniors and see if we can find some alternate locations for their Thursday gathering.
Can I just suggest that before anything, that we be informed that some idea of how this would work comes back to council? Because I was at the open house. I certainly heard from a lot of people. I felt the connection that the community has with that building, a strong connection, but also a connection that the seniors have with their cards. And I think it's, I think we learned once, I remember when Mayor Fisher was mayor, and the Stroud seniors were relocated at that point, and it was not a happy situation. So now, if it could be somewhere relatively close to them versus telling them to go to Cookstown or Churchill. There might be the opportunity, but to move them to Lefroy or Churchill or Cookstown, I don't think is an option.
Your Worship, one of the options that we are exploring would be the community space in the new health hub, which will be located right here in just a short jaunt down Yonge Street from the current location. We haven't confirmed those details yet, but those are the types of options, and I certainly heard loud and clear, as all of us did that were in attendance, that that gathering is an important gathering for that group, and we will work with them to make sure that as we explore those options, we engage them at the appropriate times to make sure that they're comfortable.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I didn't make it there that evening, but I did read the report in full. I have met with a local pastor, and we had a conversation about the youth and some of the issues that were brought up during the election period in Alcona with the youth center and different things. I have done work a little bit in the past with Barrie Youth Haven. So if whatever comes of the Stroud Arena and redesigning it or reusing it, I would like to see some consideration somewhere in there of having a bit of a youth hub that we could maybe connect with Barrie Youth Haven and have a satellite site that we could work with some of our kids in the area. Thank you.
Councillor Ices.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and I'm glad that you pulled this this item as that this is in my ward, and as you said, there was quite a bit of interest at this event about the future. We had to do a little bit of backpedaling, I think, with some of the rumors that were out there, and I wanted to thank staff for doing their best to alleviate some of those concerns. So my question would be, so what is next as far as sifting through the feedback, and is there anything on the horizon that the Stroud residents can maybe look forward to? Maybe that's a little premature, but I wouldn't want a long period of time to lapse where Stroud residents could say, well, we spoke and nobody did anything. And I know that's not the case, but sometimes if we don't communicate what's happening, then those thoughts are out there. So I wonder if we could get some comments on that.
Mr. Enwood.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Ices. It is a little early for us to be able to determine what next steps will take place, but I think as you would have seen in this memorandum, it was very clear that the primary focus was around the ice rink and its utilization, and it was made very clear through that first exercise at the open house and through our online engagement that there is a strong desire to see that continue to be in place in the Stroud facility. And I think what you'll see in the coming years is there are some fairly major infrastructure projects that we need to tackle with some fairly significant dollars associated with those. We have a roof that's about to come to the end of life, and we'll have to invest some fairly significant dollars in the coming years in repairing core infrastructure of the facility. At the same time, we have strategic planning coming down the pipe with council, and we want to get through that exercise before we start to determine any specific upgrades or amendments to the facility or the property. We want to make sure that anything we are doing is in line with our strategic plans. So I would suggest that there will be plenty of communication out to I know the media's been waiting. CTV wants to come back and have another interview with me, apparently. But we will certainly communicate back out to everybody that here's the findings, this is the first step in that. And the public will be engaged in the coming months as we work through the strategic plan with respect to that particular facility.
Councillor Ices.
Just maybe as an aside to that, it was interesting, I think someone forwarded a news article on a similar exercise that Bradford was going through with one of their facilities. And the article more or less commended
our staff for directly engaging with the community instead of possibly hiring consultants in. So if we learn anything from these things, that I think that's a valuable point to move forward with.
Thank you. Councillor Sadi?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple comments on this one. Because I, like many councillors, was at the open house at the Stroud Arena, and having worked with the seniors in the town for over 20 years, transportation is a big problem, and many do not have access to Uber. And to move a amenity for them causes a great deal of concern, and trying to even carpool with neighbors. So, you know, looking at, I'm glad to hear about the option of looking at the Rizzardo Health Center. It would be ideal if it was something still within Stroud, because I think to the residents in Stroud, it's important that they have amenities that are available to them in their own ward, and any of us would be fighting for that. And I certainly wouldn't agree to those residents having to go down to Lefroy or Churchill. I'd rather see the Entrepreneur Startup Program move somewhere else. But a question on that, because one that came up afterwards, and just trying to understand, I did send an email, but it may have been lost in all the emails to staff. Just for my understanding, is the banquet hall still available for residents to book for personal parties or club activities, or is this not being chopped up for office space?
Mr. Inwood?
The banquet hall is still available. We have put a hold with a potential start date for the entrepreneurial hub. I'm looking across the room. I don't know if we have a date in mind, but July. So we have put a hold on booking anything further beyond July, but if somebody wanted to book a facility for this weekend, next month, they certainly can have access to it.
Councillor Sadi.
Thank you. So I guess I was just trying to clarify that the banquet hall would still be available once the entrepreneurial startup program is using it, that this would be a shared space. I'm seeing a no. No? Sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
Regardless of the space, so if we're talking about the space, the entrepreneurial hub would be a permanent entity, meaning it would be custom designed to house entrepreneurs, quite frankly, 24/7, 365. So ultimately, the space that we end up going in is flexible for entrepreneurs, but not flexible for multiple community use.
Thank you. The good thing about the new Rizzardo Health Center would be that, because I know those stairs are pretty killer going up the stairs at the Stroud Banquet Facility, so if it's more accessible, that might be good. But we're going to have anything, before anything happens, this would come back to council, I take it? From everybody? Mr. Taylor, Mr. Rayner? I'm going to leave it to you.
Your worship, members of council, I'm going to suggest a little reframing, which is we will be talking about this until we're blue in the face, because it's one of the most innovative suggestions to entrepreneurial incubators in Simcoe County. So we will have no problem talking about this, and council will have certainly a number of opportunities to engage. We want to share the good news story about how we've been able to find space at an economical value, as opposed to, for example, constructing an entrepreneurial hub, which we won't talk about. But there is certainly more opportunity, and I think what we've learned from the Stroud engagement is that we need better data on the actual leisure activities that are going on. You know, to put it another way, if we have space that's quite expensive, that's utilized twice a week, I'm not sure that's the most effective use of taxpayer resources. So how do we repurpose space? How do we find ways of better utilization and respect the comments that many councillors have made tonight about the value of community hubs in their communities? And that's a critical piece. Certainly, it's very loud and clear in our placemaking document, our place official plan. We want more of those social connections, social collision spaces, not less. So we'll certainly, we hear your comments, and we'll continue to keep council informed as we move forward.
Councillor Icy.
So I appreciate the comments about, this innovative job-creating endeavor that we're going on. But part of me wants to have both, right? I want to have that community space for our community. And that is the biggest space that we have available for a wedding reception, and that it builds community. So we're taking that away, but we're not really replacing it. So I'm trying to figure out what I want to do about those thoughts. Like I would almost make a motion that we look for another spot for our innovative hub, and maybe report back next meeting if that's possible. That would be my, and there's costs involved with that, I'm sure, but that would allow us to make a decision where we could possibly keep our community space and create this new exciting opportunity. I like to have it both ways. That's my motion.
Can you just hang on to that for 1 second, and let's see if Mr. Rayner's got a way of moving forward.
Thank you, Your Worship. And certainly we take your point, Councillor Icy's, through you, Your Worship, that event space, particularly of the wedding, dare I say, bachelor parties and other things that might go on, it's critical. And there's a number of moving parts here. One is a $1 million kitchen that's in play, and to what extent can Rosardo be repurposed for those kinds of events, particularly with the leisure space? There is an opportunity which Council is aware of because we've briefed you in camera related to this file, so I can't get into that in public right now, but there are some moving parts there. So I think even without a motion, Your Worship, members of Council, I'm certainly hearing you, staff are hearing you. We do not want to jeopardize the ability for the community to have space. So what we'll do is come back to Council as soon as we can. I'm just not sure if it's going to be March 13th or the 27th, but certainly before we spend any money on repurposing Stroud, we will come back to you with a proposal and a presentation and a report that explains the due diligence we've done to date, because in fact, Yelmer, our investment accelerator, and Dan's team have been busy looking at many of our spaces, and there's different costs associated with repurposing some of our other spaces. But Council, to be fair, may decide that's actually the best move. To your point, Councillor Ices, in terms of we want our cake and we want to eat it too. Maybe there is a right mix here. So we're hearing you, and we're happy to report back with Council. We're prepared to provide Council with the information and have you digest that and then discuss, as opposed to limit us to a specific type of recommendation that looks for us to provide you with a solution that you may have already be inclined to adopt today, if that makes sense.
So you understand that, nothing gets repurposed until it comes back to Council. Is that okay? Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Setti.
I just wanted to make a comment that I concur with Councillor Ices, because I would have a concern that the largest banquet facilities would not be available to residents in that area, and I look forward to the report from staff as to the recommendation and solutions they will have for that.
Thank you. And when we do, could we, it'd be good to have the data. I certainly heard some wonderful stories about some wonderful parties that were in that room, but they were in the like 80s. And also that kitchen, I'm not sure that's a working kitchen anymore. If it's, so that would be part of it too. And finally, if I might, I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but the courthouse in Churchill and what their lease is, like how long they are going to be there. Those are just some thoughts that have come out of my mind at 9:45. And so then all in favor of the receiving for information, that's carried. And next is our RISE recommendation, moved by Deputy Mayor Davidson, seconded by Councillor Sadi. All in favor? That's carried. Good night, Mr. Lindsay. Next is a recommendation for the Committee of the Whole, adopting the resolutions in Committee of the Whole. Councillor Fowler, Councillor Ices, all those in favor? That's carried. Announcements. Now, Councillor Fowler's had a very exciting announcement tonight.
It's when someone actually goes to another country across the Atlantic and wishes to represent Canada, I take great pride in the fact that she comes from not only Innisfil, but proudly Ward 5. We have a young lady, 20 years old, Christy Alford. She is a Special Olympian. She is going to be going to Abu Dhabi between March 14th and 21st. She is going to be going to participate in the 100-meter dash and the mini javelin. To date, this young lady already has 10 gold medals and 2 silvers. So as it currently stands, I take great pride in the fact that she's going to represent our country, but she comes from Innisfil directly.
That's absolutely wonderful, Councillor Fowler, and perhaps we've got a little bit of Innisfil swag or some pins for her to take there with her that she could pass out. And if you would ask her maybe when she comes back to come to council and bring her medals, we'd love to congratulate her in public.
I'll speak to her parents directly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sadi?
Just one piece of information. It's always nice to hear of businesses that expand and grow in the town, purchase their own property, and a build is a testament to working with the town and having a business here. And Elkota Animal Hospital, that was previously located in the Crossroads Plaza, have currently moved onto their property on Innisfil Beach Road, now in my ward. And they are my vet. They will be having an opening house later in March. I don't have the exact date. It is coming up, so I will announce that as the ribbon cutting. And the Pharmacist Save is now open and operated and running in the professional medical building on Innisfil Beach Road across from the Esso station. And again, it's good to see businesses thriving.
It certainly is, and March 24th is the opening house for the animal clinic. Councillor Ices, did you have any announcements? Deputy Mayor? Councillor Payne, any announcements?
I don't have any announcements, but I just have a warning to whoever is going to be the gentleman that's going to tell the elderly women that their location is going to be taken away because the earth is going to move.
And lonely Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I do feel kind of lonely here. Yeah, I'm an announcement. A longtime resident of Lefroy. He was born, raised, and died there. And a friend, John Atkinson, who was a I think, the first volunteer fireman in Lefroy back in '67, I remember, died. And at the age of 82, there will be a memorial at Station 2 this coming Saturday from 1 to 3. Everybody's welcome. And I wanted everybody to know that.
Thank you. My condolences, Councillor. I have to just thank the very brave souls who jumped in Lake Simcoe last Saturday, including our very own CAO and also Councillor Nickel, who was the top fundraiser for the event, and of course the Deputy Chief. I was at a Police Services Board meeting with her last night, and now she's sick with a cold and sneezed all night, so I'm feeling very guilty. I also was pleased to present retiring Dr. Hankey with a plaque of appreciation from the town of Innisfil for all of his service over the years, and able to congratulate him and enjoy his retirement. March 8th is International Women's Day. There's a lot of events in our area. I'm actually pleased to be traveling to Collingwood that day to participate in a panel, Women in Leadership, and I'm excited about that. And on March the 11th is Showcase Your Business at the Innisfil Idea Lab and Library, where there'll be a number of Innisfil businesses showing off their professionalism. And with that, I'm seeing, sorry, Councillor Rayner. Mr. Rayner.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I know it's late. I just wanted to extend my sincere appreciation to all of staff and to Council for the two-year budget process. We certainly take your comments to heart, and we very much want to make it as seamless as possible for you. And look, the 22 budget is around the corner, 21-22. So we are excited to dive in again, and I just want to thank staff. As you've commented before, it was a very cross-functional exercise. Read sometimes complicated and very time-consuming to prepare in that way for a service-based budget, but one that we hope helped the community engage in a way that they weren't able to before. But certainly look forward to your comments as we debrief this process and look to improve it next time. But thank you very much to all staff who are watching online and are excited about being able to issue tenders tomorrow. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Very anxious to get on with our capital projects. So, confirming bylaw, moved by Councillor Van Berkel, seconded by Councillor Payne. All in favor? And adjournment. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Van Berkel. All those in favor? That's carried. And I wish everybody safe travels home tonight. And after having both those hot items, I think we did pretty good at getting out of here at 9:53.
That's a break.